What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celios Network. Before I leave for Baltimore Regionals, I wanted to record a video talking about the early metagame for Lost Origins and how I'm preparing for Lost Origins format, since we do have events coming up in that format that, if you're not going to Baltimore, I'm sure you've already started testing for the Lost Origins standard. So we'll talk about pretty much how I'm preparing for it, my views on decks and things like that, to try to give you a little bit of a heads up and an easy start to what you should be testing. So let's get into it. What I am testing is going to be, for right now, I'm testing Giratina V-Star. And what I'm testing it for is to see how focused on Giratina V-Star does it need to be. How many extra text can you add in? How thin can the Giratina line be? We see something like Gustavo Wada's fourth place list from the late night 56 on play.limitlesstcg.com. Gustavo is playing 2 Giratina V and 3 Giratina V star with the Thornton. So can we go lower than that? Can we go to 2 Giratina and still have it function? Those are the things I'm testing Giratina to find out. Lost Zone box. What is the least amount of text that you can play to cover the largest spread of meta? So this is typically how all toolbox decks should be looked at. Because you can go very wide with a toolbox deck. You can end up just teching in 10 different attackers, but most of the time that's not going to be optimal. If that's the only way to counter all the things you want to counter, then maybe you try to make it work. But in my opinion, you want to cover the largest spread of meta with the least amount of cards. So something like, I don't know, Zamazenta V. Maybe that only counters Kyurem V Max and Ice Rider Calyrex V Max, and it doesn't help in any other matchup. All you have to decide is Kyurem a large enough meta share that you need to put in that tech just for that one card or one deck, or can you find a card that counters Kyurem VMAX while also countering other things? So those kinds of results and findings are what I'm looking for in my testing with Lost Zone box decks. And let's find a good Lost Zone box deck to use as a starting point. These, I feel like there's definitely a lot going on in a lot of these. They're very widespread out, and I would like to start out with something that's a little more consolidated, I think. So I mean, it might even end up being something like this. I think this is a good example because they're playing the Articuno, so it is Cramorant focused, but they're just playing a couple extra things like Radiant Zard and Sableye. Uh, but the Cramorant Articuno might also end up being considered a different style of deck, so you could just start with the highest placing Lost Zone box. Um, Off the bat, Raikou V, very focused tech for Palkia V Star, but maybe that ends up being what you need to play to beat Palkia V Star. I think a Kyurem tech is also uh, in the realm of something you'd want right now because Kyurem seems pretty popular off the bat of the format. And then finally, Palkia V-Star. And what I'm testing this for is to find what are the reasons to stop playing Palkia. Palkia is great. The first place list from the late night 56 is a great starting point. Palkia got first, second, and third, and also sixth in this 300 person Lost Origin uh, legal format tournament. And partially, I think that's because people. Okay, so like only 20 people played Tina in this tournament, right? 19 people played Tina. I think if all 300 people that entered this event had a fully unlocked PTCGO account and could play whatever deck they'd want, we'd see Tina spike. More people wanting to try Tina. But I think people were just playing this event with cards they had or cards that they could get, so they didn't have to trade 35 packs for a single Giratina V-Star. So we had people playing Palkia and Mew, Arceus, Pika, Arceus, and Teleon, and not saying that those people wouldn't have played those decks, but I think some of those people might have changed over to Giratina with card accessibility being greater. So I think that is a factor to keep in mind here. And I think that factor goes away with pretty much every passing day as the cards get more accessible. But Palkia is also still very good. And so I'm testing it to see what needs to change, if anything. And are there reasons to not play Palkia V Star into this new format? Now, next is what I'm testing against. So these are the 6 decks that are the most important for me to practice and test matchups for right now for the Lost Origin standard format. Giratina V-Star, Lost Zone Box, Palkia V-Star, Arceus, Pika, Tina, etc. Some sort of Arceus Bibarel with Path to the Peak and other attackers. It can be Pika and Tina. It can be just one of them. Kyurem Palkia, and Mew. I expect all of these to be heavily played in Peoria, and then Peoria will dictate Salt Lake City. I'm not going to Salt Lake, but I am going to Peoria, so I am more focused on testing for that undefined metagame and finding what I want to play into it. And I am expecting to play against all 6 of these decks. So in some capacity, like over the course of 14, 15 rounds, if I make day 2, I expect to hit at least one of those 6 decks that I've listed here, unless the metagame changes drastically between now and then. This, the hypothetical metagame hasn't even been set yet because there hasn't been a tournament in this format, but these are what I'm testing against at the time being. And then finally, why am I not testing blank? Why am I not testing these other decks? So, Kyurem Palkia, I think this archetype is one of the easiest to get to a high performing point out of the new cards, which is why it's already succeeding. I currently do not see anything about this archetype which I want to innovate upon. Therefore, I'll leave it to people and play limitless events to create data on the matchup spread. You got to work smarter, not harder, especially if you're working on your own, or if it's just like you and a friend and you don't have an entire testing group. Even if you have an entire testing group, don't work harder, work smarter. We have these play limitless events where people are essentially just offering up their testing data. Here's the list that I want to play, even if they're leaving out like 1 or 2 secret techs or something. It's still generally a list they think is good that they're devoting hours to play in a tournament with, and then we get to see all of their matchups. So like the first place Palkia list, we can just go here and see their matchups. Look at all of this testing data, right? Um, it lost to Gudra and it lost to the mirror match. So the mirror match we just throw away because the mirror match, one of the Palkias got to win it, right? But then it lost to a Gudra. The Gudra was the only non-mirror match game that it dropped. So then we might ask ourselves, how bad is the Gudra matchup for Palkia, right? And we can get to that point without doing more than 20 seconds of work. All it took was me clicking onto the matchup. So work smarter, not harder. I don't need to test Cure and Palkia because the internet's doing it for me. I don't need to run 50 games with every one of these decks on this list because I can find all this matchup data. And then of course, trust your own findings, actually go and test that matchup, but you can use this to kind of focus in on where you need to put more time at. Nexus Asuine Zork V Star, same as Kyurem. I think it's very easy to get to a high performing point because it's just a beat stick deck. It's not very it's pretty linear. It's pretty linear. So I think it's easy to get to a point where, okay, we've got a consistent and it's hitting big numbers. Ship it. That's Hisuian Zork V Star. Much different, in my opinion, than something like Giratina V Star or Lost Zone Box or even Palkia, which has so many options when you're building it, so many decision trees on cards you're going to include. Mew, I can evaluate Mew, the changes needed, and the matchups without putting too much time into it. I don't actually have to sit down with the Mew deck and play it. I've played enough Mew, and I feel the same with Arceus and Teleon. Between myself and my testing group, we've had enough time with both of those decks that I think we can just give it a glance and um, again, evaluate if there's something we need to test without actually just going in looking for general findings. So like I'm not going to ladder on PTCGO with Mew and Arceus and Teleon, but I might ladder on PTCGO with Giratina V-Star and Palkia V-Star because I'm still looking for general findings with those. So I hope that helps you um, understand how I test for competitive tournaments and test for especially a new metagame and how I am testing for the Lost Origin format. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Check out my sponsors in the description down below. Also be sure to join my Discord because I think it's a great place to be for discussing Pokemon. Also, people sharing news and regionals registration links and updates on things and helping each other, PTCGO trading, stuff like that. So join the Discord, subscribe to me here on YouTube, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.